Wow, what a privilege it is to have you here with me today, Noel. We've known each other since 2014, I think. 2014.
Long time.
Yeah, quite a while, ever since I moved to England. So it's a real privilege to have you here today, and I really look forward to sharing time with you.
I'm looking forward to it as well.
So what I was most excited about is that today we're really going to tap into your area of expertise because, I mean, you come with a wealth of experience. You not only a best-selling author, and by the way, I haven't told you, I collect authors. That's what I do. I don't collect books, I collect authors. So I see you as part of my collection now. So not only are you a best-selling author, but you're also a behavior specialist, and you've got 45 years of experience in multiple countries, the US and the UK. So you live between both countries, right?
Yes, mostly in the UK.
Okay, fantastic. And you also were a head teacher. So you've got experience in the school, a special needs advisor, consultant, lecturer, parenting coach. What is it you don't do? You're amazing. So
Thank you.
You've got this wealth of experience. So I'm really interested today to tap into your wisdom, your knowledge, your expertise from your years of working with parents. I mean, how many years have you been working with parents in this way?
Well, I'm 76 now, and I've been doing it since my early 20s, so at least half a century.
Gosh, so today is going to be such a treat to just really tap into your wisdom, and I'm really looking forward to having a good chat with you. But before we start, like I said, I don't collect books, but I actually do. So I have a few of your books here with me, and I remember the first one that I bought was Calmer, Easier, Happier Parenting, and I think that's when we first met. And then this one came out, I'm trying to think, the Screen Time one came out in 2016.
That's right.
The first one, I think, was before we met. This was 2012, right?
Yes.
2016. So, and these are the first two books that I got. And then you sent me these, which I absolutely love because I'm, of course, an ex-teacher. And so, I mean, these books are just packed with information, and that these aren't your only books. There's more. Do you want to tell us a bit more about your Calmer, Easier, Happier Parenting series? Because that is such a valuable series of books.
Yes, on Amazon, there's a series of 4 books. So the first one is the Calmer, Easier, Happier Parenting, which people very fondly call their Bible.
Oh, nice.
Then there's Calmer, Easier, Happier Homework, which is the yellow book. And many, many parents have found that so helpful because, you know, in many households, homework is a blight.
Struggle.
On evenings and weekends.
I think they should do away with homework.
Well, the countries that have done away with it have lost nothing.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then Calmer, Easier, Happier Boys, which is the green book. And that's another one of the best sellers, if I say so myself. And then Calmer, Easier, Happier Screen Time, because so many parents are just at a loss for how do they manage the technology because it's so addictive.
That's a huge issue at the moment. It's, you know, as the founder of the Kids Life Studio, and we've got a global network of coaches. And so in all the countries that we work in, we are seeing technology as one of the biggest instigators of anxiety, inability to communicate, self-regulate. So it really is a huge issue. So that was a very valuable book to add to my resource. So you've got your series of books, and what will happen is I will post a link to your books so people can access those as well. But besides your books, I know that your absolute passion is tangible tools for parents and really getting to the crux of things. And what I've always loved about you, Noel, and from the first time we met, is that you're a straight talker. You say it as it is, and I love that because parents sometimes need someone to tell them the truth, to be a mirror, right? To reflect to them and to give them strategies. And I know that you've got 3 reasons that you believe why children behave the way they do. And so I'd love for you to share a little bit about what those are and some of your wisdom behind those.
And it's very important for parents to understand why children and teenagers behave the way they do, because a lot of it can be quite frustrating and perplexing. And when parents understand why, then they're halfway to being able to respond in a way that's going to make things better rather than make things worse. So the first reason that children behave the way they do is because they're humans and they have human nature just like we do. And as an example, one of the human nature characteristics of children is that they're very curious. So they're driven to find out about things. And that's more important to them often than what the parent or the teacher is telling them to do. Tied with that, although not exactly the same thing, is that children are desperately trying to live in the moment. They're
As
interested
all should be. I think we should take a page out of their book. We should be living in the moment, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Or at least more than we do.
Yeah.
So children are looking around them all the time and wondering and exploring instead of doing what the parents want them to do. So that's what sometimes people call horribly normal, in the sense that parents may not like it, but it's a fact.
Yeah.
The second reason that children do what they do is the individual genetic inheritance from their family. And often when I'm talking about that, a parent will tell me that the characteristic that they don't like of their child comes from the other parent's side of the family.
Go figure. They say when you point a finger, you actually have three pointing back at you when you're laying blame, right?
That's right, yes. And then the third reason why children do what they do is when something goes wrong and you end up with a child who has, let's say, poor executive function. And that is an underlying cause for a lot of learning difficulties, social difficulties, emotional difficulties, problems at school, problems with friends, problems at home. So those are the three main reasons, and it helps parents to understand that.
And so when parents understand that, so you obviously a very expert parent coach, and our network, we are child coaches, so we kids life coaches, we work with the child as opposed to the parent. But when you're working with parents, how do you translate that to them in a soft, non-invasive way that they don't feel overwhelmed or judged when you're sharing this wisdom with them?
Well, quite often when they're talking to me about some annoying behavior of their child, I'll say, why do you think he's doing that? And that way they're coming up with, oh, well, I guess it's because he's 4 years old, or I guess it's because he's a boy with tons of energy, or I guess it's because he's really jealous of his older brother, or I guess it's because he's not doing well at school and that makes him feel terrible. So I don't have to tell them everything because there's a lot that they already know and haven't really voiced even to themselves. Yes. Yeah.
And so
when I ask parents and they start answering, then I can gauge what level of understanding they've reached inside themselves, and then just take it gently from there. So it's not as if I'm going to lay a whole bunch of information on them that they're not ready for.
Yes,
That wouldn't work.
I think that's so huge, is that so many parents feel judged. They're doing the best that they can with the resources they have available, and sometimes it just takes one person to come into their life and just to reflect things back at them, because I think intuitively most parents do have the inner wisdom, but in amongst, I don't know if you're the expert, but in amongst our hectic lifestyles and technology and all the pressures of COVID, homeschooling, etc. I think sometimes parents get really overwhelmed, and they just
not just sometimes. Yes, and particularly mothers. At least in this culture, in the cultures that I'm the most familiar with, the first world European countries and the US, mothers are held responsible for everything that goes wrong in families, which of course is not fair and it's not accurate, but it makes mothers feel as if they're never doing a good enough job.
Wow. We find that in our coaching program with the children, we invite parents to participate in a pre-consultation and a post-consultation, so that we can gauge the need of the family. And very often we only have the mother attending that pre-consult without the father. The father seems very absent. It's very seldom that fathers actually buy in. And we always recommend and we ask and we request that fathers do attend. And usually what happens is they may not attend the first session, but when they see results in their child, then they attend the fourth session.
Oh, that's good.
Because they get excited about it. So I think traditionally, mothers definitely do take a lot of extra responsibility on their shoulders. And in fact, I was speaking to a single parent earlier, and she said to me, gosh, she just feels like she has to do everything, be everything to her child, and that she's never good enough. And I think that is a huge deal. And she's a brilliant mother. In
our practice, we require both parents from the beginning.
Yes.
And sometimes they decide that they won't do the program because the dad's not interested. But interestingly, often several months later, when things have got worse, then they both circle back and they say, okay, we're ready to really think about this together.
So as kids life coaches, like I said, we are specialists in coaching children and helping children to overcome their barriers. When would you say that parent coaching is beneficial, and when do you think our coaches should refer on to a parent coach, our kids coaches? When would
what I understand is that there are ways that you want and hope and expect the parents to be supportive.
Yes.
And if you've got an accurate way to find out whether that's happening, then I would say if it's not happening, then an intervention is needed. Because children need home to be positive and firm and consistent. Those are the three watchwords of calmer, easier, happier parenting. Positive, firm, and consistent.
Absolutely. So with regards to the difference between parent coaching and child coaching and kind of the cross-pollination, is our child coaches, we do involve the parents, but we never offer advice. We just purely offer support in making their lives easier. And the way we do that is by empowering their children to make better choices. So I know that you're of the opinion that there's no such thing as a really bad parent, or is there?
Well, there are some parents who do some terrible things to their children, but that's the minority. I think what the majority is that parents, of course, are doing the best they can, and often many, many things, including their own unhealed traumas from their childhood,
I was going to say,
get in the way.
That's second reason why children behave the way they do. You were talking about inheritance, and that's intergenerational trauma, isn't it? Where it gets passed down from generation to generation, and the cycle gets perpetuated. And that's why coaching of any sort, whether it's child coaching or parent coaching, is really to put a spotlight on the places that sometimes need to be healed. And I'm sure you've seen a lot of that in your practice.
Yes, and I'm always amazed by how brave parents are.
Yes, absolutely.
That they're willing to face things that are very uncomfortable, because it's really true that parents will do anything for their children. They really will. So with guidance, a huge amount can be accomplished.
Well, we're very privileged to work with amazing parents, because as you would know, anybody who asks for help, in my opinion, is incredibly courageous, because
Yes.
asking for help and admitting that you may be treading water and that you don't know how long you can still carry on treading for, I think that's incredibly brave, as you were saying. And parents do have a really tough job of figuring things out, especially with our shifting landscape. And on that note, I want to ask you, how do you think childhood has changed? I mean, over the past few years, especially.
Well, over the past few years, especially, yes. But even before that, it used to be the children had much more free time. And parents had less of a sense that the neighborhood was a minefield. So children played out. They weren't always underfoot. They weren't always at home where all the technology is. They were with other children doing all sorts of interesting, risky, exploratory kinds of things. And nowadays, so many middle-class children, the only way that they can get any time away from their parents is to isolate in their room.
Oh. You know,
so that's one of the ways that childhood has changed.
Childhood has definitely changed, and we're seeing an increase in the side effects: anxiety, depression, self-harm, suicidal ideation, and many more labels. And I'm wondering, you know, in an ideal world, let's just imagine that you and I had a magic wand. And we could wave that wand over the entire globe and we could create the perfect childhood. What would that look like for you? What would be the perfect childhood to raise, or environment to raise a child in?
Well, you know how they say it takes a village. So if that village is looking out for all of the children, that means that the children, wherever they are, there are people who care about them and pay attention to them and can guide them gently and lovingly. I have very strong views about education. If I had a magic wand, school would be very, very different.
No homework.
Well, for sure, no homework, but many other things as well. There would be, I don't even know if this is the time to talk about it. That might be the topic.
If you want to, you're more than welcome. I did ask you the question. The wand is yours. You can change the world.
Okay, so I can tell you a few things. Is that there would be no letter or number grades, because that actually reduces motivation.
Wow. Okay.
And children would be, for the skill subjects, which is literacy and numeracy, children would be taught at their skill level.
So not at a grade level, so skill level in particular subjects.
Because nowadays, the way school is arranged, approximately 25% of any class, the children, they learn quickly, they get it right away, and they're just sitting around bored and getting into trouble, right? Just occupying themselves by flicking paper clips because they need to do something.
Airplanes.
Exactly. And another 25% are confused, and of course then they switch off and misbehave. So it is completely possible to teach children, to cluster children by their skill level, so that they're learning at the optimum level for themselves. So that's one thing I would do. I would not require children to learn any subject matter that didn't interest them. Therefore, if the adults feel that there's something important for children to learn, the adults are going to have to make it interesting.
I love that. I love that. Yeah. So not learning any irrelevant facts by rote. And so when you say make it interesting.
Yes, there's lots of different ways to make something interesting.
So targeting visual learners, kinesthetic learners, different styles of learning?
Yes, different styles of learning, also different groupings of children. So we know that just sitting and listening is the least effective way to learn. And I don't know if you're familiar with a book called The One World Classroom, or possibly The One World Schoolroom, something like that, by Saul Kahn. Do you know Saul Kahn, who started Khan Academy? And what he says is that the best use of technology in education is to flip the classroom. So at present, children come to school and they listen, or don't listen, but they're supposed to be listening. And then they go home and the homework is doing something about it. And the parents don't understand, so the parents can't help. What he says is flip that. Have the exposition, have the bit where the kids are learning about something, have that on video. So the children can watch that at home as many times as they want. They can pause it, they can think about it. And then school would be for the doing, where the teacher is there to help and guide and explain. And
so like to coach, to mentor, right? And be a tour guide.
Exactly.
Yes,
exactly.
Yeah. There are a few schools around the world that are quite progressive in adapting these principles, and they are having great success. But it takes a transition. We really do need to wave more of these magic wands. Anything else, Noel, that you would do if you had to wave this magic wand and rebrand childhood? Because basically childhood needs a rebrand. We need to change the trajectory of childhood, because currently it's moving in the wrong direction. And we need to really steer it back on course.
We do. And although I said that for the skill subjects, children should be grouped by skill level, I would say for everything else, there should be what's called vertical grouping. So the children are with pupils who are younger than them and older than them, because they learn from they learn from the others, and they learn by helping and teaching others. I'm very excited about the whole forest school movement. And I would definitely have days when they're just outside all day long doing whatever moves them.
Do you know, it's funny you should mention that. I was walking along the seaside with my husband yesterday, because there was sunshine in England for a change. It's winter, it's freezing, but there was sunshine. So we went for a little stroll and a bite to eat. And I suddenly had this really vivid memory of me as a child with my teacher and my class down at the water's edge in the rock pools, looking at the crabs and the starfish. And I had this vivid memory and a very fond experience. And I remembered that day. And I wonder if that's not testimony to the fact that the more practical and the more experiential and the more outdoors we are with children, the more is going to be remembered.
Yes.
I mean, I'm 47 years old, and I went back to childhood in that moment, and I remembered it. I didn't remember the boring history lessons and filling in worksheets and coloring in flowers. I remembered that. And we need more of that. We do need more outdoors. And I mean, you spoke earlier about play, taking children back to play. Now, at the Kids Life Studio, we say that play is the language of childhood. So our coaching is called play-based coaching. And so we don't talk to the children. So what you're saying, we agree with completely. We don't talk at the children. What we really do is we allow them to direct and guide the direction that we take, and we let them do the talking, and we let things open very naturally and organically. But I suppose the danger comes when you're in a classroom as a teacher with multiple children. It can be quite difficult. And that's where the discipline, in inverted commas, and the management, the classroom management style comes into play. And I know that you've got a lot of expertise in that. And a lot of our coaches do group coaching as well, where we work with groups of families, parents and children. But I think one language that is universal is play. And if we can get children back playing, we'll see less issues in adulthood.
One of my favorite quotes is, "Play is the work of childhood." That's what.
Whose quote is?
I don't know. I don't remember who said that.
I'm going to look it up.
Some genius.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
And when children are inundated with extramural activities and overscheduled.
Yes, that's something I talk to parents a lot about.
Oh,
About instead of carting children around to music lessons and extra this and extra that, is for parents to actually do that stuff with their kids at home.
yeah.
Play around on the piano, play around with gymnastics, instead of taking them to an expert,
Do you
which
think
of course means there's a traffic jam, so it takes
yes.
an awful lot of time to get there and back.
Do you think sometimes parents maybe struggle to tap into their own inner child and to go back to that play mode? Because we all love to play. It doesn't matter how old we are. We love to play. And maybe sometimes parents think the job of parenting is serious. And
It's that, and it's also that parents are in a hurry. Parents are rushing. So they're rushing children through things, and they're rushing themselves through things. So part of what I teach parents is to plan realistically so that there's enough time for each thing, and then to just breathe into it, sink into it, enjoy it. Whether it's a meal, whether it's getting ready for bed, not to rush it.
that is such great advice. In fact, my mantra for 2022 is calm over chaos, because I found that with all of this COVID going on, there's such chaos in our world. And sometimes we struggle to just ground ourselves and just breathe. And I think the home is the safest environment to just do that, just to slow down and to recalibrate and to take the time to actually do the things that create small mindful moments and memories.
And I think mothers in particular need permission to do that, because a lot of mothers are conflating motherhood, which is really about relating to your children, with all of the domestic tasks. So they feel that they're not a good mother unless
It's either or.
it's the meal or it's the laundry. And what I say to parents is, if you could afford it and if you wanted to, you could pay somebody to do all those domestic things, but you cannot pay somebody to raise your children. So
Connect.
motherhood has nothing to do with the domestic things.
Fantastic. So what should mothers be doing?
Well, one of the things that I teach parents to do is something I call special time, which is one parent with one child doing something that you both enjoy, that's not in front of a screen, that doesn't cost money, and that doesn't involve a food treat.
I love that. And does a child choose, or does a parent choose what happens? Or
They
do
alternate. They alternate.
Oh, I love that.
And the alternating is very important, because if the parent is only choosing, then the parent is doing what they want to do, and the child may.
Power imbalance, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But a lot of times parents, if they're willing to do the special time, they just assume that they'll do what the child wants. But actually that turns the parent into a servant. So it's alternating.
Because that's another thing, Noel, we're speaking about rebranding childhood and creating this ideal childhood, but there still need to be boundaries in the home, and the parent is still in charge. And
Correct.
very often a lot of children have passive parents who allow them the freedom to control the household. And I'm sure you've seen a lot of that as well.
Well, what I see is a mixture within the same family, so that parents will be too controlling about certain things and too passive and permissive about other things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not even that those things are stable, so they change. So there's no emotional safety from the child's point of view, security, when parents aren't consistent. So that's a huge part of what I teach parents, is how to be consistent. Mm-hmm. And everybody wants to be consistent, but it isn't actually easy. No. And every parenting book says try to be consistent. The reason that my parenting books are so many pages, because I write fat books, exactly, is because instead of just saying try to be consistent, I explained how to be consistent, or how to do whatever it is that I'm recommending. Can you give us a top
tip? What's your top tip for being consistent?
If you've got a partner, sit down with your partner and talk about what it is that you want together. And generally, parents who are partners have the same fundamental values. But because opposites attract, the likelihood is that one parent will have chosen a partner with a very different personality.
Yeah.
So it's going to require thinking about, how do you be consistent? What is it that we want? An example that I hear about a lot of times is parents, both parents will want children and teenagers to limit their screen time. And they might come up with a rule. Well, one parent is very detail oriented and is noticing when this rule is not being adhered to, and they're doing something about it. Whereas the other parent feels very uncomfortable with the the annoyance and the irritation that that parent has. So their response will be, oh, don't worry about it. It's not that big a deal. Okay, so it's 10 extra minutes. So you can see that that sets the parents up for an argument.
Absolutely. And it also confuses the child.
For sure, for
Yeah.
sure. So in my book, Calmer, Easier, Happier Screen Time, I talk about how parents can decide thank you, not just on what rules you want, but what to do to reinforce, rather than just waiting until it goes wrong, what to do to reinforce it when things are going right. I talk about that a lot in all of my books, is not waiting until things go wrong, but noticing and mentioning, capturing the improvements, the small steps in the right direction, and reinforcing those.
Now that's a golden nugget right there, because
Yes.
when we coach children, we believe that success breeds success. So when we do goal setting, we start with the very small things that are very easily achievable, because once they achieve that, their confidence grows. So catching children doing things right is not, it's almost as if it's not hardwired, because our brains are hardwired to spot the negative and to spot.
That's true. That's true, because that's what kept us alive.
Exactly.
And we are the descendants of people who really knew how to pay attention to problems and therefore do something about it and survive. Whereas the cave person who was just a placid bouquet gatherer probably became lunch for a saber-toothed tiger and didn't, in fact, have descendants. So we are hardwired to notice problems.
So in other words, parents sometimes are helpless to that, right? When they click into that survival mode, when they're under threat, if their child is kicking off, I guess they're going to spot the things that are going wrong as opposed to the things that are going right.
That's right. But most of the time, something isn't going wrong. It's just that because parents feel very busy, very rushed, very stressed, when nothing is going wrong, parents tend to take the time to get something done. Send another email, unload a machine. And what I teach parents is to notice all of the times when things are going okay, and to mention it, and to be very specific. The kind of acknowledgement and approval and praise that I talk about in my books is called descriptive praise, where parents describe what the child has done that's either right or at least better than it used to be. And it's quite often difficult for parents at first to refrain from the over-the-top, exaggerated praise. And I think part of that is that parents are trying to make up for when they're all the times when they're grouchy and grumpy and annoyed and irritable. So when they remember, they'll say, oh, that's fantastic, darling. And actually, most of the time it isn't fantastic.
So
but there are definitely improvements.
Yeah. So to praise the efforts really.
Well, that's what people say, but I think I wouldn't call it that, because effort to me is too vague. I would say to praise what actually happened.
Actually event. So to speak it back to the child, exactly what it is that they did.
Yeah, so instead of saying, oh, you're playing so beautifully together, which means nothing to the child, to say something like, you were both looking at the book, and neither of you grabbed the book away from the other. You were sharing.
Fantastic. Yeah.
You see? So my books are full of examples of descriptive praise. It's the first strategy that I teach parents, and I always come back to it.
And you know, that's something that we also do in our kids coaching program. In our I think it's our 3rd week of coaching, we give children a jar, and we call it the positive thoughts jar, and they start capturing moments in the family of things that have gone right, things to be happy for, things to be excited about, achievements, and they write them down and pop them in the jar. And on a weekly basis, they sit and they have their family meeting and discuss what they can celebrate within their family. And I think it takes discipline and habit for families to really reach out and dig deep sometimes, to notice in amongst a busy lifestyle, to notice the little moments that actually count. And
do you find that the families that you're involved with, do they sit down for a family meeting every week?
Now that's where the consistency comes into play.
Mm-hmm.
It's not scheduled and time isn't made for that and is not part of the weekly routine, then no. Those families that really have their planner and they schedule it as they would a dentist appointment or a doctor's appointment, they tend to get it done. And it's a really lovely part of family life. In fact, during COVID, I did some research with children around the world, and I asked them about the good things that happened during COVID. And you know what most of them said? And I just love this, is that the most enjoyable times was the fact that their parents had more time for them and they could sit around the table eating dinner together, cooking together, playing games together, not technology, computer games. I'm talking good old-fashioned board games, building puzzles. And that just made my heart beam, because I was speaking to these 12-year-olds who were saying it as it is. It's actually quite simple. And I think life has become very complicated with too many choices. And that's why our tagline at the Kids Life Studio is where choices are made easy. And so if we can get children to make better choices about the small things, all of those micro choices are all going to amount to
they add up.
Happy life.
Yeah.
So Noel, I mean, you and I, we can carry on talking forever, and I think we definitely have a follow-up. And we've been speaking about doing a parenting course for our parents around the world, where you said you would host. So we definitely need to speak.
Yes, I would love to.
With regards to that. But it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today. And before we ring off, I wonder if there's just one final piece of advice that you can give professionals who work with children, such as our life coaches or teachers or counselors, sports coaches. What is the one piece of advice you can give when working with parents? Because we're not experts, but what is your golden nugget of what we can implement ourselves?
I think your coaches are probably already doing this, whereas many professionals who work with families forget, which is that parents are doing the best they can.
Absolutely.
Which doesn't mean that's all they have to do. We can always help them to do more, but to start with the acknowledgement. So it's not only the children we would descriptively praise, it's the parents as well. Yes. To recognize how difficult it is to be a parent and to just be beaming out our appreciation for them.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I absolutely love is that when parents come into our consultations, usually we sit on bean bags, and the parents sometimes arrive in their suits and high heels and painted manicured nails, and they've got to get down on the bean bag. And I had one particular parent, it was delightful. I asked her to kick her heels off and just to relax and to ease in. And she was like, I can't take my heels off. I haven't painted my toenails. My toenails look terrible. And you know what, when it comes to children don't care about the painted toenails, and nor do we as coaches. We just want parents to connect with their children. And I'm sure you've seen that the solution to most of the anxiety, self-harm, and the trauma that we're seeing is from a lack of connection. And
that's why the special time is so important.
Absolutely.
To spend some time every day, if at all possible, and usually it is possible, just one parent with one child doing something that you both enjoy. It makes for such a strong, positive connection.
Now, one of our coaches has 6 children. So I'd imagine the more children you have, the less your time is. But it certainly is something that parents need to commit to. And also our kids' life coaches, many of them are parents. And what I find is, you were talking earlier about parents being self-judgmental, especially mothers. And what I find is, because they are professionals working with other people's children, they feel that they need to be perfect as parents. And it's not necessarily the case at all, because I think children need to learn that their parents are not perfect and that their parents do make mistakes, but it's about how those are navigated together as a family.
I would say it's not about being perfect, but it's about always improving.
Progress over perfection.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And also that self-awareness, isn't it?
And it's also about parents being willing to acknowledge their mistakes to children, and not to grovel. I see parents doing that too much. Oh, I'm so sorry, darling, I shouldn't. I don't mean that. But
sounds like my husband when he's done something wrong.
But to acknowledge that in any miscommunication, the parent could have done something better, and so could the child.
Yeah, absolutely. Life is a learning adventure. And I think if we embrace
it is.
If we embrace it that way, it's a learning adventure. If we embrace it that way, we can really work in collaboration. And so again, I wish I could give you that magic wand, and I wish we could wave it together, but I know that you are doing amazing work.
Thank you.
From
and
your
you
side.
As well.
Thank you
and your team.
Absolutely. We're very privileged to have an amazing team around the world, and you also have a team that you work with, and we're doing similar work but different work, and I think it takes all of us as puzzle pieces, and if we fit them all together and we work towards a common goal, which is to have a happy childhood, right? I mean, it's
I would say
calmer, easier, happier childhood.
Exactly. I always make I make the distinction between happy and happier, because when parents want their child to just be happy, the tendency is to just give the child whatever they want. So nobody is just plain happy, but we all can be
happier.
And
that starts with gratitude.
You're right, it does. And that's a super thing for parents and children to share.
Yeah, which is part of our coaching program. And gratitude is something that is fundamental to our existence as human beings, just being grateful for where we are and being happy in the moment.
It opens up so much.
On that note, I have immense gratitude for having shared time with you, Noel, because I know that your time is very precious, and I really appreciate your wisdom and your knowledge. And as I said, we will post the links to everything below the video. And if people want to connect with you and reach out to you, how do they do that? Where do they find you?
Well, our website, if they go on our website and leave their email address, we will email them a complimentary copy of our ebook, which is Calmer, Easier, Happier, Descriptive Praise.
Oh, very nice. I'm definitely going to make sure that we get that out to our network.
Good.
Yay.
Good.
So thank you for that. And I wish you a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you very much. It was lovely talking to you.
Take care.
Bye.